Hi students, this is AJ sir. Let's study 9th standard ICSE Math, exercise 2C. In the second sum, a certain sum of money is put at compound interest half yearly. The interest for two successive half years are 650 and 760 rupees 50 paise respectively. Find the rate of interest. Now the first compound interest given is 650 and the second one is clearly greater than the initial one. In fact, every successive compound interest is greater than the previous one. Why is that? Well, that's because in compound interest, you get interest not only on the principal, but also on the previous interest. So the increase in the interest is actually the interest on this interest. That's the beauty of compound interest. So the difference between them, which is rupees 110.50, that extra interest was simply because this was added to the principal for the next half year. So the principle we will be using in this exercise is that if the compound interest of the first period is rupees X, then the compound interest for the next period on that same sum at the same rate will be X plus a little bit extra, because there will be interest on rupees X, which was the previous compound interest. So there is interest on interest. That is why compound interest keeps on increasing with each period. This is also true for amount. If the amount is X, then the amount for the next period will be X plus the interest on X for that one period. This is the logic we will use in the sums. Let's solve the second sum to understand this better. The previous compound interest, we will assume it to be the principal. And the new compound interest, let's assume that to be the amount. So the difference between them is the interest, of course. This interest is on this principal amount. In reality, this is not the actual principal, this is the compound interest. Now we'll use the usual formula. Here, the rate is not given. That's what we have to find out. And remember, since half year is mentioned in the sum, time will be half. So on calculation, we get 34% per annum. It's better to label this as CI1 and CI2. Let's write P and A in brackets. This is important while solving a sum so that we don't lose any marks unnecessarily. Now in the fourth sum again, the compound interest for the second year is given. It is for the second year. It's not the compound interest of 2 years. Only for the second year. And the compound interest for the third year is given. And we have to calculate not only the rate of interest like we did in the previous sum, but also the sum of money, that is the original principal. So first of all, let's find the rate as usual. The compound interest of second year, let's assume that to be the principal, and the compound interest for the third year is the amount. The increase in compound interest is simply because interest was charged on the previous compound interest as well. So the difference between them is that extra additional interest on interest. So using the formula, we get the rate as 10% per annum. Now to find the principal, we'll assume principal to be rupees 100 first of all. So we get the assumed compound interest for the first year. That's the amount after first year, which becomes the principal for the second year. Then we find the compound interest for the second year. These are assumed values. So when we assume principal as 100, we get assumed compound interest as 11 rupees. But the actual compound interest for the second year is given as 1089. So what's the actual principal? Cross multiply and get the answer as rupees 9,900. Now in the sixth sum, Geeta borrowed 15,000. So that's the principal amount. It was compounded semi-annually, by the way, that's every 6 months. And after 6 months, its amount is 15,600. So find the rate of interest. So principal is given, amount is given. The difference is the compound interest for that first period of 6 months. But the formula is PRT upon 100. So substituting the values, we can find the value of rate 8% per annum. Note the time is half a year here. Now in Roman number 2, they have asked us to find the total amount after 18 months. So we know the principal for the second period, that is 15,600. Let's find the compound interest on that. That comes up to 624 rupees. So after 1 year, the total amount is this one. Now this will serve as a principal for the third period of 6 months. So P3 is this much. Let's find the compound interest on that for the next 6 months, which comes up to this much. So the final amount at the end of 18 months, that is at the end of 3 sessions or 3 periods, is this. Now in the 8th sum, the principal is given, the rate is given, the time is given, and also it is mentioned that after the first year, some amount was paid back, which would decrease the amount to be paid after 2 years to clear the debt. Calculate the interest paid for the second year. So first of all, principal is given, so find the compound interest. So after 1 year, he was indebted with rupees 8,560. He had to pay this. But out of this, he repaid only 3,560 after first year, and the remaining amount will become the principal for the second year. So in the second year, he will have to pay interest only on this remaining amount, which comes up to rupees 350. So that's the first answer. Now in Roman number 2, they want the total compound interest paid in 2 years. Obviously that will be CI1 plus CI2. That comes up to 910 rupees. And in Roman number 3, they've asked what is the total amount paid throughout the 2-year period. Well, total amount is always the principal plus the total compound interest. Principal is 8,000, which he'll have to repay. And the total compound interest which he has paid over the course of 2 years is 910. So on addition of these two terms, we get rupees 8,910. So mark this sum as IMP. Even mark the 10th sum as IMP. And whenever there are sub questions given, make sure you write it while solving. Otherwise we lose all the marks. Now in the 10th sum, the principal is to be found, and all they have given is that the interest for the third year exceeds the interest for the first year by 252 rupees. So if you can guess the method we are going to use, it is assuming principal as rupees 100. So when we assume principal as 100, we start getting all the assumed values. So first year's compound interest is 10. Second year's principal is 110. Second year's compound interest is 11. So the third year's principal is 121. And the third year's compound interest is rupees 12 and 10 paise. These are all assumed values. So if you look at the difference between the interest of the third year and the first year, it's just 2 rupees 10 paise. That's assumed value. So now unitary method. So after you find the difference in the two compound interests, we use unitary method. That is, when we assume principal as rupees 100, the difference in the compound interests of third year and first year respectively was rupees 2.10. But the given actual difference between them is 252. So what is the actual principal? Cross multiply and get the answer as rupees 12,000. In the 12th sum, a man borrows 10,000 rupees. That's the principal. And at the end of each year, he pays back 20% of the amount for that year. The amount, not the principal. how much money is left unpaid after 2 years. That is after the second year. So we start with P1 and we calculate the compound interest at the rate of 10% per annum. That's 1,000. That means the amount after 1 year is 11,000 rupees. But he is able to pay back just 20% of it. Subtracting that, the principal for the second year will be rupees 8,800. So he will be charged compound interest on this new principal for the second year, which comes up to rupees 880 only. This will be added to his principal, and that's the amount at the end of 2 years. Again, at the end of the second year, he's able to pay back 20% of it. That's 1936. So what is the balance amount yet left unpaid? That is 9,680 minus this, which is 7,744. By the way, this will be the principal for his third year.